everyone, welcome to the Modern Martial Arts Society. Today we're going to talk about training Aikibujutsu, but specifically on the online format. So we've started making an online program or curriculum for those that are interested in learning Aikibujutsu, but may not have access to a physical training location. These videos can also help those that have access to physical training locations. However, it is best to learn from your designated instructor. So the following videos will be categorized from all the color belts in their respective segments from white belt to black belt. Within these video trainings, you'll have both short reference videos as well as longer in-depth training videos. So the shorter reference videos are just that. They break down a particular technique, and it's just an overview of how the technique is used. It's typically only a couple minutes long, made more for a refresher for the student. The longer videos are actual instructional videos. These videos are intended to actually teach the new material to a person that has no previous knowledge of it. So it'll do an in-depth breakdown of the technique that we're training in that particular video, and they will typically also have a training partner in those videos so you can actually see what the technique does and how to actually apply it against a real person. If you're training by yourself, you should really have two primary training tools. One of those being a training partner, a real person, is ideal. And second, a bob punching bag from Century Martial Arts. The bob punching bag is just a human torso and head. And so what it does is it really lets you learn how to target your techniques and build up a preference. So you'll learn how to take what you already have as a basic knowledge of the techniques and apply what you like in the most applicable scenario. So for instance, we don't teach a lot of closed hand strikes, but I really prefer a vertical punch this way when I'm striking to the solar plexus, rather than like a palm strike or an edge of hand or something like that. So I find I like the vertical punch for that format, but if I'm striking up closer to the neck or pretty much anywhere else, I prefer various different open hand strikes. And really you only learn this through application. So the bob training dummy really helps you with finding your niche and what you like to use when you're targeting specific areas of a body or a person. If you're unable to find an actual training partner, the next best thing will be a training dummy that you can get for like what wrestlers use, their full body training dummies. It'll at least give you a sense of how biomechanics work. Obviously, it won't be the same as a real training partner, but it's something. And then finally, what you should have is just a couple like throw out or roll up wrestling mats. Those would be ideal, especially when you get into like the ground grappling and the stand-up grappling. Because when we get into those, especially the stand-up grappling, you're going to be learning throws and takedowns, and a lot of those can generate a lot of force. And so if you don't know how to fall effectively, the training mats are really there to save you. Moving on from that, so when we look at our course, we have the white belt to black belt. So we have white belt, yellow belt, orange belt, gray belt, green belt, blue belt, purple belt, red belt, and then finally black belt. When you're going through these belts, you have a minimum requirement for each belt, and they're all pretty much the same from white belt up to first degree black belt. You'll have a minimum training requirement of 30 to 60 credit hours. So right in that time frame is where you're going to have enough knowledge to where you can more than likely proceed to the next belt rank or apply for a promotion for the next belt rank. So the 30 to 60 hour credit hour is a window. So some people will pick it up faster, especially if they have previous training. They're going to be closer to that 30-hour mark. The 60 hours for those that take a little extra time to learn, but most people find themselves in that median of a 45-hour training sessions before they actually feel comfortable to promote to the next rank. There is no cap on the maximum amount of hours you can have. You can be a white belt at 400 hours, as long as if that's what it takes to get the material down, then that's what it takes. As you go through the belts, so white belt has the most techniques in all the belt ranks. It has approximately 60 techniques to learn. And that's because you're learning an entirely new thing from ground zero. So you're learning all these different warm-ups and exercises, break falls, break rolls, and then you're getting into strikes, ground grappling, and then stand-up grappling as well. So you're learning a lot of different principles and techniques that someone typically isn't familiar with before they come into a class like this. And so that's partially why white belt is as hard as it is. White belt in our system is, for the most part, seen as the most difficult belt to learn. Everything is downhill after white belt because you have to learn all these specific techniques. And really, what you're really learning are the core principles behind them, but we're teaching them in technique format. So after you get done with white belt and you promote on to the next belt, yellow belt or orange belt or whatever, the training is going to look a little different. Obviously, at white belt, we only have one curriculum to really follow. When we promote from white to yellow, every class should still review the white belt curriculum before proceeding to the yellow belt, because everything builds off of white belt. So if you're not good at white belt, you're probably not going to be good at yellow belt, and so on and so forth. So reviewing white belt every class ideally, or almost every class, is the optimal way to do things. When you're first learning a curriculum, it's going to take a while. Like if you did the full white belt in one class for your first time doing the entire class, it'll probably take about 2 hours to go from all the techniques all the way through white belt. As you pick them up, and especially as you progress and rank up to yellow belt, you should have a very good grasp on those and at least know how they work without really second guessing yourself. You might not have the proper application to be able to use it in a real world environment yet, depending on the technique, but you should be able to understand what that technique is and how to apply it on a relatively low resisting, even medium resisting opponent. So when you get into that yellow belt rank and you're reviewing a white belt, it should take you about 5 or 10 minutes. And as you go through these next color belts, every previous belt should take about 5 to 10 minutes to recap on before you get on to your next belt. So you're looking at about 40 minutes of recap once you get into that really high level of color belts, which is fine, because when you get to the higher belts, as you progress through from white belt to black belt, we start trimming the material. So whereas you're learning approximately 60 techniques in white belt, brown belt might only have 15 techniques. So it becomes significantly less per belt, because the idea is you're building on that white belt. You're bringing white belt up to your brown belt level, and then you're practicing and adding that into your tool belt as well. So finally, when you get to black belt, you take whatever belt you're at. So if you're at first degree black belt and you're going to go to second degree black belt, it's going to take you a minimum of 2 years. So whatever belt you'll be promoting to is the amount of years that it will take for you to be actively training to proceed to the next rank. And once you're at black belt is where really the big milestone happens. So previously you're learning all of these hundreds, if not thousands, of techniques and variations of a technique. But what you're really learning are the principles behind the techniques. and you're told about the techniques, we demonstrate the techniques. However, in black belt is where you really dive into learning the techniques based on the principles rather than the technique itself. So the idea behind that is once you've established a good foundation of techniques, now you're really understanding what makes the techniques work, how they apply, and how they're effective. So you're able to interchange techniques smoothly and transition from one form of combat to the next, from like striking to ground grappling or whatever, seamlessly. And that's primarily done through learning our 38 universal principles. If you don't have a good foundation on the principles, then that will be pretty difficult to interchange so dynamically, so quickly. And then once you get into black belt as well, is when you're practicing these techniques that you learned previously and you're really diving into the principles, this is also where you start to become your own martial artist, so to speak. So from white belt to black belt, we're learning as if we're reading out of a cookbook. We're going through the steps and the motions, but eventually we're going to become that chef. And that chef kind of does what they want based on their own knowledge. They know what they want, and they're able to create at that point. And so once you reach black belt, that's where you start to become that creator. The system is meant to conform around the user, not for the user to conform around the system. So once you're in that black belt and you're able to actually use these principles effectively and understand how they work, you become your own artist in a way, and you take the techniques and principles that really work for you, and you keep those and you hone those. And then all the other ones, you don't necessarily throw them away, but you don't have to spend a lot of training time on them if there's not something that you perceive that you would use. But it's still important to know so you can teach others. And so primarily once you reach black belt and beyond, a lot of what we do is about teaching others, perpetuating and propagating for future generations to learn. So the art's not lost, basically. And the more people we can teach, the more people we can keep safe. So it's important to learn how to be dangerous so we can choose to be peaceful. We never want to be dangerous without being justifiably so. So the last thing I want to cover is from white belt to black belt. A lot of people will ask, how long does it take to get a black belt in whatever system? That ultimately depends on you and your abilities, but on average, it takes about 3 to 5 years. It just depends on how much you're willing to put in. The more you put in, the more you get out of it. So if you're able to practice way more than 3 hours a week, you could probably get to black belt in 2 years or less. But if you're basing on 3 hours of training a week, you're going to take approximately 3 to 5 years to get from white belt to black belt. And again, that depends on how many hours it takes you in between each belt rank. The idea is not to speed race through the belts, but we want to get through them in a very time-efficient manner. So we don't want to spend too much time on them, just enough to really kind of understand what's going on, because we're going to recap all of those later on. So in white belt, for example, if you have just a basic knowledge of how the techniques work, often that's good enough, because every other belt after that, you're going to be doing white belt plus whatever belt you're on. So white belt, yellow belt, and then white belt, yellow belt, orange belt, and so on. So it's not like it's the last time you're going to see those techniques and material. You're going to be practicing that very regularly. But don't misunderstand that and think you can just rush through the training curriculum. If you come to an exam unprepared, you will not go to the next rank. So it's not something to just blow off and say, oh yeah, I'll just get promoted. That's not how we do it. If all of our system is based off of merit-based training. So if you do not deserve the rank, you are not going to get the rank. Because at the end of the day, your performance reflects not only upon you, but everyone else that trains. So we can't have black belts out there that look like they are white belts. And we shouldn't have white belts that look like black belts. So if you, for example, come from a different system, you might not necessarily fall into that 30-hour requirement. So if you get someone, for example, that has a black belt or two in a different system, and they're pretty familiar with what's already being taught in white belt, they can likely progress to another belt that's more suitable to their merit sooner than that 30 to 60 credit hour, because we don't want to hold them back either. We need to put people in the right spot for where they are. But in order to progress through that, they have to know the material in the belt. So if I have someone that's a multi-time black belt and they have a really good foundation, but they don't really know any of the white belt material, they have to learn all that white belt material like what everyone else does before they can rank up. But if it takes them 6 hours to really get effective at it and know what they're doing with it and they have it memorized, then they're probably going to progress to yellow belt in the 6-hour mark rather than the 30-hour mark. The time frame is largely based on someone that has no previous experience. And then if you have someone that's super athletic or someone that just grasps the knowledge really easily, they're going to fall closer to that 30-hour mark rather than that 60-hour mark. So anyway, hopefully all this information has been beneficial to you. We look forward to seeing you guys training, and I look forward to hearing from every one of you guys. If you have any questions, don't feel like you can't reach out. Feel free to reach out. You can reach me on the comments section. You can find me on my email, modernmartialartssociety@gmail.com. I'll be more than happy to help people out. If you have any questions or qualms with training, if you have any problems with instructors or anything like that where you're not grasping the material, or maybe the instructor you're with isn't a proper fit for you and your personality, I'm more than willing to help out and try to rectify that issue with you guys. So until next time, thank you.